What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel, Anime Fiction. I'm back with a new episode of What If Naruto was teleported to another world, part 10. And if you did enjoy this video, like this video for the next part. And if you're new to my channel and like my content, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for more crossover fictions. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter the 12th of November X 778 near the edge of the forest, near the town of Magnolia, was a one-story cottage surrounded by trees. It was small compared to most houses and domiciles people live in, more like an apartment than a house, but it was a suitable home for a person who didn't mind appearances. Inside the small house was a small living room with a sofa and a table. Connected to the humble foyer was a small, fully equipped kitchen that appeared to have some dishes and a refrigerator next to it. Down the hall next to the living room were 4 doors in sight. 2 on the right wall, 1 on the left and 1 leading to the empty space behind the house. The first door opened into a messy bedroom, with used and smelly clothes thrown on the floor and hung next to an unmade bed. Flyers and applications pinned to a bulletin board on the wall. In the closet were sets of different colored shirts and long black pants, with several long spare layers with hanging caps for convenience. In addition to the bed, there was a small wardrobe on which several paintings were placed. In each of them was a blonde boy with a huge smile, whether with a scarlet girl, a white-haired teenager or a group of younger boys, girls and a cat. In the second bedroom was another bed that was still spotless and looked unused. On the mattress were various other items of clothing, weapons, and some jewelry. A few parcels and gifts delivered by grateful customers and friends of the guild have been placed in the room. On the left wall was a bathroom. A bathtub, a shower and a sink that had towels placed everywhere interchangeably. And out the last gate, behind the cottage, weary grunts could be heard echoing in the dying trees. Outside, in the growing autumn wind, brown and orange leaves tumbled and fell in thick clumps in the clearing. And in the middle of the clearing was a young blonde teenager, his prosthetic arm behind his back holding a large rock firmly above him. He lowered his slightly glowing right hand. 953, 954, 955. Beads of sweat rolled down his mustached face as he took several deep breaths with each consecutive push-up. He continued with his morning exercise as he focused on the task at hand. A few feet away from him, the sound of swords cutting through the void rang in his ears. A young scarlet-haired woman dressed in a simple white blouse and skirt was practicing swordsmanship with a great sword and katana. Her movements and cuts were quick and precise, cutting through any loose leaf that got in his way. Did she continue her sword practice while the boys started finishing their weight training? 999, 1000. Naruto moved away from his hand and dropped the rock by his side, obtaining a strong clash when the large rock settled on the ground. He sat down with his legs crossed while he turned the pain in the shoulder, feeling the layer of sweat, in particular the frame. He took several deep breaths as he felt released from his work and leaned against the rock for support. He looked over his shoulder. "How are you doing, Urza?" "Give me a minute." Urza concentrated on her swordsmanship as she swung her swords as fast as she could and cut through the branches of a dying tree. Before the wood could start falling to the ground, Urza swung Excalibur and Kusanagi in a brilliant flash of light as Naruto was amazed at her skill. She moved like a flying feather, swift and graceful yet fierce and captivating. His talent with swords far exceeded hers in most ways. And anyone who has seen his move would completely agree with that statement. He landed effortlessly on his feet, his blades in a reverse grip as he spread his arms for balance. And as the branches began to approach the yard, they began to snap and fall into piles of well-chopped wood. After a few moments, all the cut wood fell at the feet of the fairy as she wiped a head of sweat from her forehead. She looked to where her friend was looking with a smile on her face. "How do you think I did it?" "As good as you always make, of course," the 14-year-old said as he stood up and tried to wipe the sweat from his face. "I have to stop training and you had to come and make sure I can do it. Why are we in such a hurry again today?" Urza sighed wearily as she walked over to Naruto and slapped him on the head, receiving a groan from Jinchuriki's marked slap. "Idiot. I've told you several times already, we are traveling with Master Tahara for an important meeting." She grabbed Naruto by the collar of his black shirt and reluctantly dragged him to his house as she grunted in annoyance. As he tossed him inside, she entered and closed the back door. She then quickly turned around and pushed a startled Naruto into the bathroom. "Wash yourselves and get ready well." "Ah. Do I have to?" "Yes now." Naruto sighed and closed the bathroom door as Urza smiled in her victory. The Scarlet Girl stood in the corridor as a bright light consumed her. When she calmed down, she found herself in her best friend's new house in her trademark plain armor. She watched as she nodded and began walking through the simple apartment complex that Naruto had bought over the last few months. After his arrival, Naruto had no place to stay for the foreseeable future. Urza had offered to give him temporary lodgings on the hill, but after reconsidering and berating him severely from the other residents, she decided to drop the offer. After that, he got offers for some of the other guild members. Natsu promised that if Naruto could beat him in a fight, she would let the new member stay at his house. After a quick and humiliating defeat at the hands of the mustachioed boy, the Dragon Slayer was forced to let him stay. Of course, since the two were arguing who was stronger and brawling it out, the dirty shack didn't last long as a proper home. Then some of the older members extended invitations to him. He stayed in the guild basement for quite some time. Mirajane also gave her an open bedroom to be with her and her siblings. Elfman nodded nervously and Lisanna happily interested in learning more about the gorgeous new blonde wizard who seemed to know Urza personally. And Mira was the most interested in the new cute boy joining her team and leaving Urza's group. Naruto had no idea what he was talking about, but Urza grew more and more angry with the white-haired whore. Then finally Master Makarov offered him a similar place to live as he did for Natsu when he first arrived in Magnolia. All he had to do was take a few jobs and earn enough jewelry to buy his own house. So from there, the kid accepted all kinds of requests and missions with all kinds of rewards and difficulties. And he met every challenge he faced with a steady hand and a big smile on his face. And, of course, she would help him whenever he took on a bigger mission than usual. Finally, after several months of savings and reparations, he bought this ramshackle little house on the edge of the town square. And I couldn't love him more. Urza looked at an old clock on the wall and saw that she was lost in thought. She walked back down the hall and opened the door to the bathroom Naruto was washing in. Naruto. Urza. And don't break in. We'll be late if you don't hurry. Then go without me. Naruto held up the towel which he grabbed off the floor and covered his crotch from his impassive friend. I'll join you. Well. I'll see you there. Urza closed the door with a nod as Naruto stood there, in his birthday suit, as he heard her boots resound off the floor as she walked away. After a moment, he heard the front door open and then close behind her as she left. Then he fell onto his butt and let out a hard breath. She's crazy. Naruto told himself as he chuckled at his friend's strange vision of privacy and decency. Naruto finished his cleaning and headed to his room. He pulled out a pair of slacks, trousers and a shirt to wear during the day. As Naruto pulled up his pants, he looked around his room and the photos he had of his friends and family in Fairy Tail. He smiled fondly as he saw images of himself, happier than ever in his entire life while surrounded by his friends. He stood there with a big, wide smile plastered on his face. An arm around a smiling Gray's shoulder. A playful tease around an angry but obviously happy Natsu with happy waving to the camera above his head. To Naruto's right, Urza stood to one side, a smile on his face as she confidently stood up. Surprisingly, Mirajane had her arm around the Scarlet Girl's shoulder as she put her arm around her and gave the camera a peace sign. To the left, Kana, Levi, and Lisanna stood together and waved while Elfman seemed quite preoccupied with drawing attention to himself. In the background, some of the adults were laughing while Laxus just shook his head tiredly. Naruto pulled his long-sleeved shirt over his head and pulled out one of the black cloaks laying on the floor. Naruto stormed out of his room and home as he ran towards his second home. He off to Fairy Tail. Urza. Let me go too. It's not fair. Yelled a fierce pink-haired boy as he complained to the cold red-haired girl in armor sitting patiently at the bar. Urza shook her head as she turned exhaustedly to the Dragon Slayer. Natsu, we're not going on vacation. This is a very serious matter that Master has invited Naruto and me to. But it sounds so hot. So let me join you. No. And this is final. Urza backed away from the counter and tried to ignore Natsu's annoyance. Sure. This was Natsu he was trying to discourage. Hell no. Natsu's hands exploded in intense red flame as he cut straight into Urza's path. If I can beat you, then Gigi will have no choice but to take me with him. Elsa stared at him blankly as a collective sigh echoed throughout the guild hall. Do you really think you'll do better than last time? Of course. I'm much stronger than last time. You mean yesterday? Yes. Urza continued to look at him without changing her features before smiling and nodding. Good. I am very proud of your spirit, Natsu. Great. So let's go, so I promise to give you my full attention and effort. Slowly a black shadow spread over Natsu's form as he watched the growing image of a scarlet-haired demon stroke a sword in his hand. His shadowed face revealed two blue and brown eyes that shone intensely like a white space that looked like a smile stretched out in the darkness. Ready? See, can I reconsider? No, KYAAAAAAHHHHHH. Natsu desperately tried to escape the sword Elsa was wielding as she chased him down the hall. You could almost see a manic glint in the armored girl's eyes as she chased after the screaming boy one step away from receiving his wrath. Mira was sitting at a table with her brothers. He was watching the fight with a pitying nod as Lisanna and Elfman paid more attention to the cerulean kitten in the younger girl's lap. Oh really? Does that idiot ever learn? Look. Don't insult Natsu like that. Her younger sister scolded her for her insult against the pink-haired simpleton. Come on, Lisanna, the honeymoon phase has to end sooner or later. Takeover's younger sister blushed at her sister's direct use of the phrase. I mean, you already have the baby. She pointed to the strange kitten that was eating some fish. Your father is stupid, isn't he, baby? Yes. See. Nei-chan, don't use happy to insult Natsu like that. That? He doesn't know the difference. He would accept anything. It's so stupid. You are stupid, aren't you? Yes. The sky is red, isn't it? Yes. I'm the guild queen, right? No, look, he agrees with wait a second, Piccolo. Urza. Makarov yelled as he appeared with guildarts from the rear storage room. We have to leave early. Leave what you're doing and get ready. Urza did exactly that as she released the choke that was around Natsu's purple neck. Yes, sir. Hello guys. Naruto greeted everyone as he walked through the guild gates, receiving numerous hellos from anyone who would listen. Naruto. Natsu got up and ran towards his blonde friend. Are you seriously going with Ji-chan to this place in Era? I want to go. Hee hee. I'm sorry Natsu. Just us today. Then I'll kick your ass first. Natsu withdrew his fist and set fire to it. The fire dragon's iron fist. Naruto smiled as he blocked the fiery punch with his left hand and grabbed Natsu's outstretched arm. He spun around and threw a screaming Natsu over his head and onto the ground. He let go of the younger boy's arm and set him down with his eyes rolling. Dear friend. But not quite yet. Oh. Naruto walked over to the table where his friends greeted him. Hello lads. What is going on? Mira-Jane stared aimlessly into the distance. Gray and Kano went on a mission with Macau and Wakaba. And Levi went off with his new team with Jet and Droy. And the asshole? Laxus is still on a mission, Elfman replied. I don't think it's a good idea to make enemies like that, Naruto. You know how it goes. Naruto just cackled in grudging acknowledgement. After Naruto first joined Fairy Tail, he easily befriended most of the younger group, with the exception of the older blonde. He had tried to befriend Laxus, but he wasn't willing to go the extra mile to work with Naruto. And then, in the last few months, he had begun to change, showing stages of superiority and hostility towards the rest of the guild. Even his grandfather. Peeved, just because that bastard is strong, he thinks he can look down on us like that. Naruto slammed his fist into his palm as he smiled. Well, maybe I just need to knock down a few pegs. Don't underestimate him, Naruto. Mira said calmly as she smiled at the particular blonde in front of her. Take yourself to S-class status, and then you can think about challenging him. Naruto gave her a confident smile. And you're underestimating me if you think the potential for S-classes or stronger opponents would scare me. I'd give him a good run for his money. Leaning next to Lisana, he looked at Happy curiously. You think I can do it, don't you Happy? Kitten. Not Happy. He's not a kitten. Naruto. Kitten. It's not a kitten. Kitten. At least call me Neko man. Kitten. Well. The kitten is. Yes. Naruto, come on. We have to go. Naruto looked over his shoulder to where Urza and the master were standing in the doorway with guildarts by their side. He got up and said goodbye to his friends and Natsu who was recovering. He joined them at their side. Makarov looked at guildarts severely. We will be gone for a day at most. Everyone is already working or just resting. Don't screw anything up while we're gone, okay? Oh come on old chap, said the fairy tale ace as he waved his hand dismissively. Hee hee, you know I can't make that promise. Yeah, well, at least keep the damage to a minimum. Another time. No promises. Let's go. Naruto tugged the old munchkin by the neck and grabbed Elsa's hand, running down the road as they made their way to their destination. Naruto and Elsa gasped at the sight of the beautiful and intricate building that formed the capital of the Magic Council. Its walls, statues and columns filled their eyes as they could see human-sized frogs and rune knight soldiers walking everywhere they could see. Wow. That's amazing. Naruto ran into the grassy courtyard of the building. Behind him, Makarov showed the guards his ID and summons card, Urza still shocked by what she saw in front of her. Naruto. Don't leave. Makarov walked past the young man as he stood there patiently for the old master. This is the capital of magic in our country. They are very strict about how to behave and act in these establishments, said the old master with his eyes closed and staff in hand. Master, why did the Magic Council ask Naruto to come here? Okay Urza. They just have a few questions they want to ask you about a report they received. He crossed his arms and dropped his playful demeanor they were used to. Naruto, these people have very little margin for error. I try my best but I'm still on their blacklist even after all this time. I know it's going to be difficult, but I have to ask you to keep all your antics in check. I will help you with any questions you are having trouble answering. So don't worry, we will always be by your side. Do you understand Naruto? Master, Naruto left a while ago. The old man looked at Urza in shock and then looked to his side, seeing that the blonde was indeed missing. He looked around in vain. What? Where did this idiot gone now? All the subordinates of the Magic Council looked at the little man in shock. I'll find him, Maestro. Don't worry. Elsa ran in another direction as Makarov watched in horror. No, not even you. This could only make this worse. Makarov was left alone in the courtyard as he fell to his knees in horror, clutching his head tightly. Curse. Curse. Damnation. Aye, if those two go crazy in the council. Latest news. Fairy Tail destroys the magical capital of the Fury Nation. War declared on the rebel guild. Makarov went white as a sheet because he knew those two would only cause him trouble in this place. He fell face down as he resigned himself to waiting for the Rune Knights to come and arrest him for treason. She heard light, frequent footsteps behind him because she knew it was his time. Are you going to lie on your stomach all day, or are you going to say hello to your old friend? Makarov moved away from his face and rolled onto his shoulders. He saw an equally short, wizened old man in a brimmed hat looking at him with a smile. Oh Yami, thank goodness it's you. She stood up. Guess I'll have to ask you a favor. Hee hee. For what exactly? I think there will be a lot of uproar for some of the young people I have brought with me, and I seriously doubt I can pay for the damage they will cause. Fairy Tail's old master looked dejected as he thought about the consequences that were about to occur. Oh come on Maki, what else do you expect? Yami walked towards the building with a happy smile. If the next generation weren't a bunch of troublemakers, it wouldn't be Fairy Tail, was it? Naruto. Naruto. Where are you? The scarlet-haired girl yelled with her hands cupped as she tried to find her missing best friend. She was attracting the attention of many soldiers and members as she screamed as loud as she could. Urza traversed a long open path while trying to find Naruto. Little lady. Urza looked at several older soldiers approaching her. The first man leaned over and asked with sincerity in his voice, "Are you lost? Need help finding your guardian? Did you see a blonde boy dressed in black? Of this height? With a mustache?" All the soldiers looked at each other questioningly. Well we. Too slow. Urza headbutted the crouching soldier in the face, knocking him unconscious. The other two soldiers behind him looked in shock at the fallen man, and then back at the girl. She looked at them. What about you two? The men screamed and fled as fast as they could, grabbing their fallen friend by her shoulders and disappearing from sight of the girl. Urza stood there with sharp eyes as a cold wind rushed through her, ruffling her skirt. It's weird. How do I find Naruto if you can't help me? I think they were just surprised by your serious attitude. Of course, I don't really blame them. Urza perked up as she heard the new voice coming from behind her. She turned to address him and. But then again, I heard you were someone who would go to extremes to get what he wants. I happen to admire that in one person. Urza's heterochromic eyes widened in shock as she looked at the young man standing in front of her. The same deep blue hair she could have easily recognized in any crowd. An exquisite tattoo that encircled his entire right eye. He wore a long white uniform that exuded a feeling of superiority. A smile on his face that showed he wasn't worried about anything that was happening. A smile he knew all too well. Urza said in a surprised whisper, J. Jelal? Hi, Urza Scarlet-san. My name is Seagrain. Naruto was on the roof of one of the corresponding buildings in the main structure. He shielded his eyes from the sun as he surveyed the vast area around the capital. I could see small houses and fields as far as the eye could see. Mountains and clouds on the horizon. Naruto laughed heartily at the sight. That's amazing. Can these council guys see it all the time? Naruto stood up and looked down at the courtyards and training grounds. I wonder what these guys do all day. Hey you. Naruto looked down and saw several frogs and men staring at him intently. Get out of there now. Naruto laughed and started running to the roof, receiving annoyed screams from everyone below him. Naruto chuckled as he felt much more invigorated and excited to be in this new environment than he was in Magnolia. So I wouldn't let anyone ruin this experience. But just as he ran off the edge of the roof, he mysteriously turned to dust, leaving the boy dangling in the air. Naruto quickly fell to the ground as his cloak billowed in the wind. He was heading straight for a bronze statue of an older wizard that stood in the courtyard. He panicked and sent a wave of magical power to cover his body before impact. It crashed and tore the top of the statue to pieces. Naruto lay rooted to the ground holding his aching head. He stood up before being surrounded by several men and frogs, all looking at him as if he had just committed a sin. They picked him up and carried him in front of one of the older men. Okay kid. Do you know what you just did? I just smashed my head on an old man's head. You just destroyed the statue of one of the founding members of the Magic Council. This is a crime punishable by at least 20 years. Oh really? You're in a lot of trouble boy. Wait. I'm sure my guildmaster can pay for this, no problem. This statue is irreplaceable and priceless. You couldn't afford it in less than several decades. Why the fuck you should keep something so in one place within everyone's reach? Tradition. But you were right about our choice of aesthetic location. We really need to keep such important figures under lock and key if we are to be this anal about their treatment. All the people there stopped their antics and looked at the statue. That she had spoken suddenly. Suddenly, it began to break into pieces and shape into its perfect condition. Naruto was shocked before seeing a figure appear from behind the statue. But you really should let him go. He's our guest of honor for today. The girl who had appeared behind the figure was a dark purple-haired young woman with her hair pulled back into a ponytail. She was wearing a white kimono that cut into her thighs. She had a nice smile on her face as she looked at the mustachioed boy. After all, we invited you. Sure. Altier-sama. All the adults knelt and bowed to the beautiful girl. Before standing up and walking away from the two younger wizards, Naruto looked around and saw that it was just the two of them. He stood up. Thanks. It was great what you did with the statue. Altier raised her long-sleeved hand and chuckled slightly behind her. Thank you very much for your compliment. I am very confident in my abilities. In fact, I was quite surprised how you managed to break it so easily. Yes. I have a pretty hard head. He tapped the top of his skull for emphasis as he laughed. People say it takes forever to get me down. Oh, and who exactly told you that? I don't know. Bandits, thugs, thieves, anyone in general who wants to fight me. The list could go on. Naruto swung his arms behind his head as he shrugged. Huh. I understand. Altier let a bead of sweat roll down his head at the casual way he just said people were trying to kill him. Well, I'm very interested in seeing for myself the extent of your magical abilities. Naruto turned his head. Oh, sure. But how exactly do you want to do it? Altier cocked her head and gave him an innocent smile. May I ask why you look so tense in front of me right now? I'm not tense at all. Obviously not. Seagrain smiled from the other end of the blade at his neck. Almost immediately after he introduced himself, the Scarlet Girl summoned a sword and held him against the wall. Her eyes were completely focused with anger and concern for the other boy. May I ask what is it? Don't mess with me, Jelal. What? I am. You. Doing. Here. Seagrain looked surprised by his statement before looking down with a sad smile. I'm not Jelal. Trust me. I wish I could help you, but, he turned to look at Urza as she locked eyes with him. After a moment, he lowered his sword and returned it to its slot. Who are you? Seagrain withdrew from his wall space and straightened his clothes. My name is Seagrain, and the man you knew as Jelal was my twin. Urza's eyes widened in her shock. That? It's impossible. Jelal never told me he has a brother. I'm not surprised. Our parents separated us at birth. I only learned the truth about its existence a few years ago from my mother. In fact, I joined this advice so I could track him down. But unfortunately, he looked at Urza, who was looking at him with a mixture of disbelief and attention. You know the rest of that story. Urza waited a moment before asking the question that had burned both her and Naruto's mind for years. Where? Seagrain was silent before leaning against the wall. I lost track of its location a year ago. I have tried many times to find it, but have never succeeded. Your guess is as good as mine as to where it is now. I am sorry. Urza looked down as her hopes faded on where her friend might be. He felt a hand on his shoulder as he looked at Seagrain. I promise you that one day I will find it, and then they can have their time to reconcile with each other. But until then, she walked past the dumbfounded girl before stuffing her hands in her pockets. Let's see how Naruto is, okay? Urza was pulled out of her slum and looked at him in shock. She looked over her shoulder at the girl. If you were wondering, of course I knew who she was. I'm the one who asked for your summons. Come on, Urza. Urza stood there silent for a moment as Seagrain's footsteps echoed down the hall. He had a distant look in his eyes as he raised his head. He looked genuinely hurt, missing his long-lost brother. But only for a moment. Then she, lost in a moment, she saw him. A smile that hid something dark and sinister. Something he was hiding from himself. Something that reminded him of Jelal. Him in those last moments. She followed him and was silent. Whoever he really was, he couldn't be trusted. Naruto somersaulted backwards away from the fast teal ball that was aiming for his face. He landed and kept dodging as the ball kept following him and breaking the ground underneath him. Naruto ran back and forth as he made his way to the unsuspecting girl across the training ground. Altier smiled and started bouncing to his feet as Naruto summoned Kusanagi into his hand. He landed in front of her and began to sweep his sword rapidly against her. She smiled as he did so. Altier kicked him in the face, which he pulled back to dodge. As Naruto jumped back, he heard the sound of his orb flying through the air behind him. In a burst of speed, Naruto spun and sliced the orb in half. The pieces hovered in the air for a moment before reconnecting and hitting him square in the face. As Naruto staggered back, the orb floated up to Altier's arm where she held it up on her elbow. You were quite agile for a young man, Naruto-san. Naruto got up and rubbed his sore jaw. And you have annoyingly useful magic, Altier-san. He smiled and prepared to return to his position. What is that idiot doing at a time like this? Urza grabbed the railing of the Rune Knight's training area as she watched as Naruto continued to dodge and throw as many attacks as she could at the other girl. Hee, it looks like Naruto is having a quick fight with Altier. How could this happen? Urza screamed as she grabbed Seagrain by her neck. Why don't you stop me from hurting her? What makes you think he would hurt her? Urza looked at him in surprise before turning back to the fight in progress. He watched as, despite all his efforts, the girl and her floating sphere avoided all his attacks. And whenever there was an opening, the girl would send the orb of her to attack it, which would almost land the shape of her against her. Overall, the girls seemed to have the upper hand in the fight. She is a proud member of the Magic Council, and my personal business assistant. She is also undefeated in this match against the Rune Knights captains. And the wielder of an extremely rare magic, Arc of Time. If you want to take care of someone, they should be your friend. Urza looked away from Seagrain and back to watching Naruto fight the seasoned wizard. It was a lot of fun, Naruto-san, but we have other business to attend to. So please don't worry if we finish this fight soon. He reached out and her sphere flowed into her fingers of her. Okay. Let's see what that brings, huh? Naruto crossed his sword in front of him and crouched down. He ran forward and leapt at the girl with his sword above her head. Altier waved, and her orb followed. With each swing of Naruto's sword, the orb was there to stop him. And with every piece he was cut into, there were more pieces to fight. As Altier moved his feet forward and swung his leg in a hook against Naruto's arm, he was momentarily stunned by the move. Pieces of spheres began to shatter against his back and sides. Naruto kept trying to stop the orb, but Altier's time magic proved his attacks to be futile. Suddenly all the pieces disappeared from view as Naruto was stunned by his action. He looked around at all the floating, slightly translucent spheres that covered him in a dome. They all moved slowly and hovered around him, aiming for his position. Altier smiled as he pointed an elegant finger at her figure, flash forward. All spheres converged on their tip and destroyed the area around them. Smoke and debris billowed into the air as Altier remained the only visible figure on the training ground. On the tracks, Seagrain smiled and looked at Urza through eyes shaded by her hair. So, Urza, what do you think? We're not as incompetent on the battlefield as you thought, are we? Urza slowly nodded her head in agreement. Do we need a doctor to check this out? 4 days. Seagrain looked at Urza. What, I'm sorry. 4 days. This is the number of times a week I have sparring sessions with Naruto using swordsmanship. He also wakes up before sunset every morning to do a regular training session of running around Magnolia 5 times. And then come back to practice your combat techniques using your magic if necessary. She raised her head and continued to talk about her friend about her with a small smile on her face. And when he takes a mission, he generally takes the works that are responsible for the capture of criminals and hold back the monsters. It hits some tough spots and does some damage, but it always got the job done. And even when he was outnumbered and defeated, he never stopped fighting until he was the last one standing. Altier summoned his sphere into her hands and began to walk back to a safer distance from the smoke-covered area. Hey Altier-san, what was that? Altier's eyes widened in surprise as he turned just in time to see a clawed hand reaching towards his face. He dodged desperately beside her as the onslaught of the bullet cut the ends of her hair and flew into the wall behind her, leaving an animal claw print embedded in the concrete. Altier watched from where the attack had landed on the dust cloud. In the thicket of dust and smoke, the figure of the boy could be seen with an aura of light that surrounded his whole body. The great light compressed and lowered until it touched her skin a few centimeters away. Naruto raised his head, showing bruises and blood dripping from the corner of his mouth and forehead, and gave the counselor an extremely impatient smile. This fight didn't end as quickly as you thought. Altier narrowed her eyes and took a stance of her own. Cheel looked up in slight surprise when he could see the smiling blonde walking forward with his magic surrounding his entire body. And Urza folded her arms with a proud smile on her face as her partner, student, friend prepared to fight again. She fulfills all her tasks with such tenacity that she has made quite a name for herself in the guild. Cheel crossed his arms over the railing and watched the rest of the fight gleefully. The hunter. Naruto rushed forward with his sword at the ready, aiming at the girl in front of him. Altier jumped back and sent her tear straight at his head. Naruto lunged forward and struck the ball with his forehead, breaking it on contact. He leapt into the air and let the sword slip from his hand. Turning in mid-leap, Naruto jumped back and kicked his copy sword into the stunned girl. He grit his teeth and reached for the incoming blade. The sword would rust and then turn to dust before he could touch it, leaving her unharmed. As Altier lay back, he realized that Naruto had disappeared from sight of him. She turned in time to see Naruto crouched behind her, watching her. With her smile back on her face, the magic around her hands spread to the tip of her middle finger, forming what looked like blades that glowed with light. Naruto swept his blades against Altier, forcing her to retreat in an attempt to distance herself from him. Despite her best efforts, the armor's magic cut the edges of her kimono and the ends of her hair. Altier snapped her teeth, leaping to her feet beside him as she left herself open for a counterattack with open arms. She grabbed his hands by the wrists and leapt to her feet, planting her feet against his chest. In a show of astonishing stunts, he flipped both of them and sent him flying across the training ground. When Naruto landed on his back, Altier used his hands to lift himself off the ground and onto his feet. He raised his hands and reversed the time of his broken sphere, returning it to his hands. As Naruto leapt to his feet and continued their little fight, Erza and Jelal watched their colleagues fight intensely. I'm quite amazed by her magical choices. The ability to copy any weapon she touches and to hide in a field of her own base magical power. Most magicians would dismiss these styles as a waste of time. There isn't much destructive power or originality in its premise. But it seems he's countering these weaknesses with his ideas. Jelal smiled, forming his outline to give him an edge in battle using any shape he can imagine, and using his weapons as distractions against his opponents to fend off the notion that he could do such things. Very clever. Erza watched as Naruto kept changing the shapes of his armor to aid him in his fight against the weather mage. From a short blade, to splayed claws, and even enlarging the space around your fist for heavier blows. The results of months of grueling training and effort to make themselves known in the fight. Altier leapt back once more and sent his orb forward at the mustachioed boy. Naruto held his position as he sent a great deal of magic to his foot, causing it to glow with a dim light. He leapt level with the ball and sent a wide kick towards the quick teardrop. Switch in flight. The light of his foot flew with incredible speed and smashed the ball to pieces. Altier reached out to adjust the orb, but Naruto was already beside him, grinning like an idiot as he stared at him in shock. His hand slid forward and grabbed each meaningful piece between his fingers, disrupting her ability to secure her weapon in her hand. You can't fix it if you can't sign up, right?
Naruto clenched his left fist, shattering the pieces further, and sent a pulse of magic through him. He fell towards Altier as he readied himself for a final attack. Steering wheel.
Idiot. A long arm came out of nowhere and slammed Naruto in the face, making all the young wizards look surprised as Naruto flew out and his attack was launched, of course. Elsa and the council duo looked to where Makarov and Yujima were standing, the guildmaster almost visibly furious at his son's actions. What are you doing, taking this match so seriously?
Master. Naruto scrambled out of the small crater, stumbling and holding his aching head. Damn, Gigi, why did you do that? Naruto completely ignored his previous engagement to Altier as he walked past her, Erza and Seagrain and towards the little man. I was in the middle of a fight. I was having fun too.
You think I'll let you cause havoc because you were having fun, you little brat? You're causing more trouble by the minute. Well, if you were going to stop me, why did you hit me on the head? Why your head is so very hard it's the only way to touch your senses. This is no way to treat your kids. Erza. She walked up to his dumbfounded friend. Tell Gigi he shouldn't interrupt my fights. Erza looked between her angry best friend and her impatient teacher as the old man behind him laughed. Naruto, I really don't think that's a good reason to be so angry at Master.
Ah, you don't understand. Naruto grabbed his head and shook in annoyance. Hey Jelal, tell him they don't have to interrupt my fight. Jellal. Naruto took a step back in shock as he saw his former best friend's face smiling sweetly at him. I can't hear you. I'm Seagrain. Anyway, close.
What the hell is going on here? Ho ho ho, I think we should all calm down and move towards the main hall. And we can explain all these misunderstandings along the way. Yujima said, easing the tension from the rather hostile air around him. Come on, Maki. Bring the kids. Altier stood there on the training ground, looking up as Naruto cried out in confusion at the events around him. Seagrain was laughing heartily and Erza was trying to calm him down by explaining the situation. But almost immediately, he again got into an argument with his master as they engaged in a fierce staring contest. As she stood there, he watched from the side from which his last missed attack had escaped. The stone was destroyed and crumbled, leaving almost nothing but dust in the large crater that was directed towards it. She was sure she could handle that boy on her own, without even resorting to using half her power to face the fight. But then he began to outdo himself, making his attacks sharper and more ferocious. His teacher warned him of what this boy might do if he were prompted to do it. He had seen what he could do, repair the broken ship and help heal his master's wounds after the fight was over. This boy was dangerous to anyone who provoked him. That's why he deliberately made sure not to rust the metal on his arm. From what Master Hades had told her, if she had done that, she would have met a rather brutal end. His master even acknowledged that the boy would be a fierce enemy to fight in the future. And even though Aide was weak, injured, and recovering from surgery at the time of the fight, this guy still pushed him further than he'd seen anyone push in his time. He raised his hand and his masterwork weapon floated back into his grip. And under the shadow of her hair, she smiled menacingly. This guy was very funny. Getting his stubborn master so far that he was now interested in recruiting new blood was no mean feat, and the name he'd received in his guild was starting to make perfect sense. Naruto Uzumaki. The impossible demon child. Now, let this call from fairy tale wizard Naruto Uzumaki come to the session. A gavel struck the wood as the court entered session. Urza and Makarov sat in the witness seats while Naruto stood on the plaintiff's bench, completely lost in what was going on around him. A lightly bandaged Naruto groaned and leaned back idly on the stand as the former council members began listing various minor mentions. After about 30 minutes of explanations from Urza and Yamiya, Naruto figured out who this Seagrain really was. Apparently, he was Jalal's brother who was abandoned at birth and was looking for his whereabouts. Personally, he thought it was bullshit. He and Jalal talked for hours about what it was like to have a family, and he never mentioned a brother. But this Seagrain was too calm to be the Jalal he remembered. After what he'd become, he never thought Jalal would have another thought like that in his life. So that just put that on his watch list. Now, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto perked up at the mention of his name. Do you know why you are here today? Naruto looked at all the council members, then at his guildmates, then back at them and shrugged. I'm not surprised. You have probably been in the dark about this whole situation, my dear boy. This is a report we received earlier this year about an encounter you may have had with a certain guild, and we wish to shed some light on the matter in a way that we can. Oh, you mean those guys from Grimoire Heart? What? It's about the fight I had with that dark guild, right? There was a loud commotion among the council members as Seagrain and Altier laughed at Naruto's confusion. Makarov sighed in anguish as Urza did the same with his hands. The tumult died down and the order returned to court. We want to ask you more about this after the hearing is over, if you don't mind. Naruto looked at them with a blank stare. Super. No, Naruto-kun, this involves another group you met. Yujima said, taking control of the situation. Another. Annoying bunch. Damn. Naruto's eyes slowly widened in realization as he straightened to his feet. We would like you to provide us with information and insights into your experiences with the group. Well. Now, Naruto Uzumaki, Org stood up and addressed the young man. Who did you intervene against in the municipality of Acacia in March of this year? Did he give you a name or ID that you remember? Oh, he said. Naruto scratched his head as he remembered their fight over 6 months ago. It was Mordro. This big dude with a seriously twisted idea of what he thought was right. As she was saying this, several frogs started writing what she said as if it was really meaningful. Well. Now, did you notice anything they were doing out of the ordinary? Something they were looking for, or what were they talking about? That? You mean besides the fact that they were trashing people's homes, killing a guy by smashing his skull, and about to slaughter a dozen people because they were in the vicinity of a fugitive? The boy said condescendingly when asked a question he considered irrelevant. The council just looked at him seriously, without dignifying his answer with an answer. A little man in the shape of a cat said to the young wizard, answer the question, boy. Naruto narrowed his eyes. I think they were checking each of the hostages for something. They said something about large magical stockpiles and, I don't know, something else they mentioned. What it was? You have to remember. I can't. It was a while ago. These little details are a little confusing. That's not enough. You have to remember as much as you can. Michello shouted angrily. Why? Why does it matter if I fought an asshole in a destroyed city or not? Boy. Do you understand the seriousness of the problem at hand? No, I don't know. All I know is you're pissing your pants for nothing and for some reason you blame me. You know what? Naruto came out from the bottom of the podium. Fuck it. I'm going home. This is bullshit. What? Shouted most of the boardroom. Even Urza and Makarov were surprised by his defiance of the immensely influential group. You can't leave. Come right back here. Why? Why should I care about these questions when I don't even know why it's so important? In fact, why are they so scared of it, huh? What are you afraid of? It's because we are scared because his influence is immense. Everyone in the courtroom looked to where Seagrain was resting his head on his fist, observing the situation with a tired look. But we don't want to admit it to ourselves. Shut up, Seagrain. No, I won't shut up. Because how are we supposed to try to fix this if we can't even muster the courage to talk about it? How are the people of the world supposed to be brave if even the Great Council of Magic is too afraid to mention them? If you really want to save this country and stop that man, Jalal sat up and looked at everyone with a strong will, then lead by example and overcome the pain. The entire council looked surprised at their newest member. Even the wizards of Fairy Tale looked at the blue-haired boy in amazement at his words. Altier just smiled and nodded. The council looked at each other as they silently talked about what to do. Until Org sighed in defeat and looked at a frog minion besides his files. He nodded and the frog turned around and gathered several very large folders in his hands. He walked over to the podium and got them ready for the blonde boy to see for himself. Naruto looked at them curiously before returning to the podium and opening them to see the contents inside. Naruto flipped through the newspapers, reading reports and articles about the independent guild's actions over the past few decades. The destruction of several dozen guilds, towns and cities devastated by the siege. And then Naruto landed on a series of several dozen photos showing the mutilated, dismembered, and utterly graphic corpses of men and women across the country. He leafed through each of the folders in shock as a look of horror and understanding crossed his face. These are just a few of the records we have on his influence. Some of his most important examples. Stomach, they would need new folders. Damnation is a fairly large independent guild that has great influence over the entire nation. And as their namesake says, they have resigned themselves to killing anyone they deem unworthy. It is a guild that operates beyond the influence of even our field of jurisdiction. But neither does it discriminate against its enemies, making all those of legal or illegal persuasion its targets, and moving across borders to neighboring countries. Its presence is already known in the lands of Kylum, Ministerial, Bosco and Set, and maybe even beyond. How can something like this still happen? Shouldn't you try to stop it? Naruto asked nervously as Urza walked over to the podium and looked at her files, covering her mouth in horror. The realization. We did. Or, at least, we tried it on more than 100 accounts to try and stop the progress of this guild's stock. But for all intents and purposes, our teams and the branch buildings in which they are housed have been vandalized and hung up on display. To show the world what happens when we try to fight them. All of the class members looked solemn as some of the senior members relived their experiences with these issues. No matter who they're up against, this guild has been on the loose for nearly 50 years. Naruto leaned forward and ran his hands over his face and hair. He looked over his shoulder to where Gigi sat there, narrowing his eyes as he counted down the time he spent listening to these acts. Naruto turned to the council. Why are they so strong? And this is where the council finds the worst problem of the bunch, Jelal said, leaning forward in his chair. The reason this guild is so sneaky, brutal, and elusive is because their master knows all about how to stop us. Naruto looked surprised. Another file was brought to him as he and Urza went through its contents. Except instead of various disasters and guild-wide location reports, he was a man. Alessandro Sorrento. Born February 17, x 691. An up-and-coming member of the Magical Military Council and attained the rank of Rune Knight Commander by the age of 30. After several years of service, he was appointed to the Kingsguard on Mercurius under the previous king. And after just 2 years, at the age of just 35, he was appointed squad leader of the Sacred Knights of the Cherry Blossoms, the king's right-hand man. He is the youngest man to be honored with that position. In short, one hero in 100 million who was at the top of his field. He had a perfect record on the court and was an inspiration to all of those of the younger generation to strive for excellence. So good that he was given a position among the 10 wizard saints at a younger age than yours. Teacher, Naruto and Elsa looked at Makarov, who reluctantly nodded in agreement with the proclamation.
He was a hero, until a certain event destroyed his mental psyche. In X731, he was chasing a group of something he called shadows, that he never seemed to catch. He made many claims about their whereabouts and became obsessed with finding them at any cost. He even forced his subordinate team to steal an experimental weapon to aid in the fight against these men, what we now know as the Jupiter Cannon.
Then the gun was discharged and fired into a village. Tonwa. The city was destroyed and after many days of searching no survivors were reported. Sorrento was seriously injured in the blast, severely disfigured and mentally unfit to continue his service. He was arrested and tried in the following days. But he escaped from the capital, escaped from Crocus and was never heard from again for several years. Naruto and Urza looked at each other and then at the folders again. Until it became known again some time later, Altier said, placing his hands in his lap. He attacked a corporation somewhere in the mountains and made a proclamation for the whole nation to hear. If anyone curses the destinations assigned to them, come to me. We will find a place to make our own, a world to redeem ourselves from. Set aside the destiny you hold upon yourself and create a world you can fight for. A world so distant that it rests in the darkness of the shadows. But we will fight, we will live as judges until God rewards us with a new light. Until then, we will bear our sins and face damnation. Subsequently, he taught several generations of wizards how to fight against stronger and more military opponents. Using our tactics and skills to help carry out their attempts and escape our eyes, its members can infiltrate any organization to keep the guild hidden. He has taught magical styles to all types of unstable and dangerous individuals, and in his actions he caused the death of thousands of innocent civilians and magicians. The losses of these people have caused many people to suffer in agony, some of whom reside in your own guild. Urza lowered her head and narrowed her eyes out of concern and upset, remembering Levi's experience with the cursed guild and the trauma she tried to forget. The reason we were so bad with you, boy, Yujima scowled, is because not many mages are able to take on a guild team and survive. Most are killed due to their own fear or inexperience. And whoever survives will go into hiding for the rest of their life, hoping to keep themselves and loved ones safe, and whoever returns is killed along with all of his guild. Org got up and got out of his chair. That's why we're giving you the opportunity to access witness protection under our care. But that would mean you would have to leave your guild indefinitely. Naruto and Urza looked at him in shock. That? There is no way. Naruto can't be taken away like this. It would be better this way. We can promise you that you will be under our best protection and services, and you will have all the freedom to do what you want that we can provide. But above all, you will be protected from any advances from damnation. Naruto Uzumaki, what do you choose? Naruto looked from the council members to the girl next to him. She looked at him with worried eyes, wishing she didn't have to leave but understanding the situation at hand. He turned to Makarov, who was holding the cane bent in his arms, lowering his head, eyes closed. And finally, he went through all the files at hand, revealing the deeds of the men he had antagonized. Naruto held out his hands and looked at the board. No. The council gasped at his response. Jelal and Altier smiled because somehow they knew he would say no to protection. Makarov smiled with his eyes still closed as Urza let out a deep breath that she had been holding. Why, you can't be serious. I won't live the rest of my life in fear that some old bastard will or will not knock on my door to save my life. I won't run from him. You don't understand, do you, boy? This man has killed hundreds of wizards in his life. Men and women who were much stronger and better than your name. He's a monster. He is a man. He is stronger than me, yes, but that doesn't make him a demon or a god. If he was hurt all those years ago in Tonwa, then I can hurt him now. Everyone is so afraid of him that they think it's a crime to speak his name, let alone fight him. Michello felt his veins throbbing as this boy challenged his authority. Org bowed. Defendant Naruto Uzumaki, he is admirable how you show so much courage and will at such a young age. But I have to ask you this. Even if you were ready to take on this challenge, are you ready to risk the life of your guild in doing so? Naruto looked at the man with the black bird in his hair, deflated at the guild's memory of him. He couldn't just risk the life of his family like that. Not just because he refused to run away from the horrible guild like that. Naruto gripped the podium as he thought about what decision he could make that would be the right one. Then, like a surge of comfort in his mind, he felt a soft hand grip his back. He looked to her side in surprise, looking at the girl in the armor as he gave her a reassuring smile. Urza looked at her advice. We won't abandon him. She told the larger group as a given, not an option, as there was no room for argument in her voice. Fairy Tail will never abandon one of them as long as we can fight. If the dam wants to send a group or an army after them, they'll have to deal with us first. And then they'll realize they've made the worst decision of their lives when they do. Trust me. Naruto looked at the girl in amazement before slowly smiling and shaking her hand in return. Org rubbed the bridge of his nose before sighing and looking down. Is this your final decision? Good. Makarov finally spoke up as he jumped up from his seat and approached the younger members of his guild. I think I can speak for my guild by saying, if damnation should put themselves in danger fighting us, let them try. Naruto and Urza smiled at each other before looking at the little man as he grinned and gave a thumbs up. The entire council looked at one another as Org lowered his gavel and adjourned the meeting. Well, that was a pretty interesting and surprisingly intense hearing, huh? Makarov joked as he walked down the aisle with his young entourage. Urza and Naruto laughed as the corridor they passed through was lit by the light of the setting sun on the mountains beside them. They arrived in a fairly large room with many tables and a kitchen next to it. Makarov spotted Yujima across the room, beckoning him closer as the withered old master waved back. You two stay here a moment, I'm going to say hello to my old friend. The two wizards nodded as they watched the little man run towards the table. Urza and Naruto were silent for a moment as they watched Makarov greet and chat properly with their old friend. Thank you, Urza looked at Naruto after breaking the silence. I don't know if I would have made it if you hadn't helped me. And I know I wouldn't have been able to bring myself to stay if you hadn't helped me. So thank you for telling them that. Thud, ouch. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck where Urza hit him. Mental retardation. I meant every word I said there. None of us would let them get you. Natsu and Gray see you as an equally annoying brother that they need to get over. And I know Mirajane wouldn't stop complaining about me if I suddenly disappeared. Plus, I'm sure Rob Ojisan will find out and be devastated when he finds out. Naruto dropped his arm to his side and looked at her. Then he gave a big smile, and you... Elsa snorted and looked in the opposite direction, an embarrassed blush creeping up her cheeks. Naruto laughed heartily at her actions. Urza. Naruto. This way. The two looked to where their master was calling them, with the other man ahead of him. They ran and reached the table they were occupying. Urza, Naruto. I wish you knew Yujima well. Senior Magic Council member and former fairy tale wizard. Yujima nodded at the amazed young duo. It's an honor, Yujima-san. Urza said with a bow as Naruto walked over and shook his hand. Yeah, well, I'm always excited to meet the new guys at my old house. And I have to say I'm not disappointed in the slightest with these new guys. Though I have to say, young man, you should learn to keep your gums closed when we old fools are all so preoccupied there. Unlike me, they're just taking advantage of the opportunity to screw Fairy Tail at all times. Naruto looked down in mild embarrassment upon learning of his rash actions. And on another note, if we old folks were dealing with half the bosses the way you did, I doubt we'd have any problems to discuss. Naruto looked at the chuckling old man and smiled. He and Urza sat next to their teacher as everyone started talking about what had happened in the classroom. Laughing at certain moments that made the old men squirm with anger. And he tells Yujima that Rob was still alive and well in the mountains near Blue Pegasus. The old man laughed a lot when he heard the news. Hey Yami, I owe you for helping the kid there. Ask what you want, my invitation. Thanks Maki. It means a lot. He looked at a waiter who approached the table. I'm going to have 15 bowls of miso ramen with extra meat, and can you hold the egg please? Oh oi, Yami, I meant like a bowl. I'm not feeding an army here. You need. Oh, I'm dizzy. I don't think I can go on. I think I'm hallucinating. Hey, what is that? A little fairy wizard has been causing trouble in the town and you want to shut down the guild. Well, I don't think I can stop. Very good. Very good. Gosh, out of all of us, it's safe to say you became the stingier after growing up. Mind you, this is a group that includes poor Lyuzuka, so that's saying something. Yujima gave Naruto a thumbs up as the boy laughed at the antics of his old teammates. So Naruto-kun, it's nice to meet you. Maki has been sending me letters about your adventures over time. Actually, well, not just you. I've heard of Natsu-kun, Gray-kun, Mirajane-kun, Little Urza-kun here. Elsa looked down in embarrassment, and I've heard nothing but complaints about this Gildarts-kun over the years. Elsa blinked in surprise. Yes, but Gildarts is actually an adult. Yes, but with the way he does things, one would think he's a boy in a man's body. Makarov said, grumbling annoyed. So, old Yujima, did you always go out with Gigi, poor Lyuzuka-san, Bob-san and Rob G-chan in the old days? Oh yeah, we caused a bit of a ruckus when we were kids. Probably worse than what you do now. And I can see you're pretty determined with yourself, Naruto-kun. Haha yeah. I am the most annoying and stubborn wizard in Fairy Tail. At least that's what everyone says when I want to take a job. Elsa shook her head in disappointment as Makarov and Yujima laughed at her confidence. Yeah, well, I'm quite used to meeting people who are stubborn and never willing to give up. And I was quite surprised when I learned that you were another one of those stubborn guys from another world. Naruto looked surprised. You know it? Yes. Maki briefed me on the details today. You came from a world where ninjas clung to shadows and your techniques were made of chakra and not magic. It was a real surprise when I heard him tell me. His perpetually closed eyes widened slightly and he looked at the serious guy. My boy, what Sorrento has been obsessed with all this time has been the existence of the people of your world who visited here so many years ago. All the things he has done over the years have been in his quest to find the people who had energy within. And making them suffer was his first choice of action. Now that he may have you in his sights, be careful. Naruto looked at Yujima and smiled. Then I'll have to get stronger, right? So if he comes to see me, I can teach him a lesson. Because even though he's so powerful, he's not invincible, right? The wizards at the table looked at the smiling blonde boy, before all smiled in response to his eagerness to stop the tyrannical group. Yujima smiled and nodded, exactly. Which means I need to get stronger. Hi, can I accept S-rank quests? No, please? No, I'll be your best friend. You can dance naked and bring me a lifelong supply of booze if you want. I will still say no. Ah, so when can I start taking those quests? When you've proven you can take on the responsibilities of an S rank. You and Urza are good, but you still have a long way to go. Naruto deflated and banged his head against the table. Urza tried to cheer him up by rubbing his back. Here you are, ladies, your first bowl of ramen. The waiter came and brought the first of many bowls to the old man with the cracked hat. Yujima smacked his lips and broke his chopsticks when he reached for his first bite. What is that? Yujima looked over the bowl at the young man who was curiously observing the fine. Why, this is ramen, kid. I thought you knew that from your name. Oh, that's ramen. Hey, I don't understand what's the matter. A pair of old hands slammed on the table, startling Elsa, Naruto and Makarov as Yujima stared at the boy. You dare to insult the greatness of ramen. When you haven't even taken a bite of its divine form. Yujima pushed the bowl of ramen forward and handed the chopsticks to Naruto. The boy looked at the bowl, the chopsticks and his friends in alarm when suddenly he was forced to eat something he had never seen before. Naruto shrunk to his soldiers and held the chopsticks in his fingers as he grabbed the bowl. He dived in and lifted several noodles between the wooden sticks. He blew on them to cool them and let the smell of the steaming broth reach his nostrils. It was actually quite interesting, the aroma emanating from the sizzling food. He leaned forward and stuffed spaghetti into his mouth. Naruto's eyes widened in amazement. The chewy noodles had soaked up the flavor of all the food swimming in the broth as the sensations exploded into a show of deliciousness. Naruto gulped down the noodles and started gobbling down the rest of what was in the bowl, causing Makarov and Urza to back away fearing they were in the splash zone. After about a minute, Naruto finished sipping the rest of the broth and set the bowl on the table. He looked at Yujima. That was, he felt a hand land on his shoulder as Yujima nodded to him. I know. I remember the first bowl one ate. One was speechless for the rest of the day. It is truly a gift from the gods. A concoction we have been blessed with and may never fully understand. I wish I knew that there really was such a thing in this world. Don't regret your past, boy. A brilliant light flashed behind Yujima as he appeared as a holy existence. Come guide Naruto through the path of noodles in a bowl. Devote your life to improve the kind of ramen. I will dominate. Please guide me. Naruto and Yujima started digging into each bowl of ramen that was presented to them. After a while, they kept ordering more bowls of ramen, earning loud protests from Makarov as they squandered their funds. Elsa looked at them in surprise when she saw Naruto gleefully eating all of Master's money while grinning like an idiot. She smiled fondly and rested her cheek on his hand, watching him forget his woes and eat what she could only assume would be his new favorite dish. These moments when all was at peace and there was no trouble in the world. These were the moments she loved the most in her life. Because even in times of hardship and pain, moments like this were worth fighting for. And she promised to fight for this peace. Even against damnation itself. Omake. And so, he takes his first steps towards he looked up at the cloudy sky, as he always has. He took a bite of the apple he had picked, as he always has. And he ignored the sounds of crows and vultures squabbling as they tried to eat the flesh of the many bodies below him that he was using as a bench. When did things become like this? When did you find yourself wandering these mountains? Must have been for some time. He wasn't the same kid anymore. And the trees had changed their leaves many times by now. The village at the foot of the mountain allegedly had a legend about him. The demon child who lived only for blood. That he didn't care about his own life or well-being, only to erase any presence that preceded him. He had lost count of how many men and women had come for his life, but he didn't care what their gender was, only if they were competent to fight them. Because that was all she mattered to him. Since he was a child he had to kill his own parents to survive the purges of magic. Since he was a child he killed wolves and bears during the winter for food and warmth. Since he was old enough to slaughter even the wizards who had come to take his life as a reward. That was the only thing that confirmed the fact that he was indeed alive, that it really existed. To fight against the strong. My God, you really are as brutal as the rumors say. The boy turned his head in silence to where an ancient, harsh voice had become familiar. From the shadows, a tall man in a long cloak approached the pile of corpses. His snow-white hair and 3 scars on his right eye with an eye patch immediately attracted his attention. I had heard of an evil child who wasn't averse to destroying anyone who came near him. The man bent down and picked up a skull at his feet. He toyed with it before picking it up and looking at the boy. Crush, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. The boy turned further to look at the old man who had dropped the pieces of bone from his hand. I recently met another guy who shared some similar traits with you. And ever since, I've been worrying about finding a talent that could match his. And you're first on the list. The boy's eyes narrowed as the scarred man smiled at him. You strive for a strong partner, don't you? Someone you could really challenge. Someone who could truly match your power. I am forming a small group, those who are on your level or even stronger. Ones that even you would find impossible to beat. And after my quest is over, you can create a world for yourself. One where everyone you meet will be someone who can fight with you. A world where you are truly alive. What do you say? The boy fell silent as he looked at the man who had offered him a great choice. But all he did was throw the apple over his shoulder and walk down the hill of corpses. He put his feet on the ground and turned to the old man. Hades sighed as he rubbed his head in realization. It's never easy for me when I do it. So, I guess I'll have to convince you then, huh? The boy lowered his head until his brown locks covered his eyes, a demonic grin growing on his face at the prospect of battling this incredibly strong foe. Well, so before we fight, can I at least know your name? The boy dropped to his knees, gripping the dirt beneath him as he looked at the old man. His eyes revealed a deranged, animal stare as he lunged wildly at the older man. Azuma to be continued.
That's it for this podcast. Thanks for listening to this video. If you did enjoy this part of the story, like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more crossover fictions. And thank you all for the help and support, and have a great day.